Today's guest is Maria-Lupita Gurule. She is a certified medical support, clinical hypnotherapist, and a world-class psychic medium. Maria has had multiple near-death experiences where she saw Divine Mother and was shown secrets of the universe. Maria-Lupita, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you giving me some of your time, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for having me here. It's an amazing opportunity, and I'm glad to be here to be able to share the story.
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, my audience loves to hear about near-death experiences. So can we hear about your most prominent one? And if you feel up to it, could you please share some extra material that you've perhaps never shared with anybody before?
Absolutely. In fact, I feel that it really is time to use this opportunity to share things that I have never shared before. So a lot of things that I will be saying today, I've never mentioned before. So this is a really exciting opportunity. So my near-death experience, what I call my full-on near-death experience, because what I've discovered is that there's different layers, if you will, of an out-of-body versus a near-death versus other things. So a near-death experience, it happened on June 5th, 2000. This was on the day that my daughter was to be born, and she was born. So I had two children now. I had a son prior to her, very, very difficult pregnancies. They even didn't want me to hold this pregnancy, actually, and I made the decision to go forward with it and have her, knowing the complications that I was going into. I had a condition with my son in the first pregnancy called toxemia. It went into a condition called HELP, which was really my entire system shutting down as well as his. Both my children are premature. My son is 10 weeks premature and my daughter's 3.5 weeks premature. And because of the complications, I actually had a stress test on Friday, and she was in distress. And so they gave me the weekend, put me on bed rest, and scheduled to have her delivery on Monday. So this was Monday, June 5th, 2000. I went into the delivery room and didn't really expect anything extraordinary. She was born at 12:42 in the afternoon, and I was given an epidural because they had to basically start the contractions. They're hard. It's a hard and heavy labor. It's very fast. And so in order to help alleviate the discomfort and the pain, I was given an epidural. So there's a difference with an epidural and a spinal block. So there's a catheter that was inserted into my spine, and there was some anesthesia that is put in the epidermis area, which is before you get into the cerebral spinal liquid, the fluid of the cerebral spine. So that just helps to calm the pain during the childbirth. So I had her with no complications. Present in the room was my mom, Bernadette, and my now ex-husband, Anthony. And they chose to keep the catheter in my back, knowing that I was going to be having a tubal ligation. Again, because I knew that my pregnancies were so difficult, literally life and death, not only for myself, but for the unborn child. It was scheduled that I would also have a tubal ligation because my body could not handle having another pregnancy. So catheter stayed in, and at about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they prepped me for the tubal ligation, which I was supposed to have through a spinal block. So I was supposed to be completely alert, 100% awake, aware, and cognizant and in the room. I was not given general anesthesia. So when I was prepped, the anesthesiologist came in and they chose to use the catheter again to put in the spinal block. And what ended up happening is I had too much of the anesthesia, an instant reaction. And one of the most complicated, they have you sign a waiver that says that the absolute most complex thing that could happen is your heart failure of breathing and complication of death. And so I knew that going into this. So I was in the birthing room. My mother had my daughter arm in hand, and I saw her, peacefully. And I remember just thinking, okay, my mom has her. And what happened is that I was given the dose of the anesthesia into the cerebral spinal fluid this time. And the last thing I remember was just everything going black. I remember going very faint, and the anesthesiologist saying, Miss Martinez, are you okay? And that was the last thing I remember, is being wheeled out of the room and going to the operating room. Well, as I get to the operating room, there's absolute chaos and panic. I am no longer in my body. What happened is that the fluid was given to me too much. My heart instantly stopped and my lungs stopped. So my heart was not beating, nor was I breathing. So they had to resuscitate me and intubate me. So there was a ton of chaos. And through this chaos, I was watching this happen as if I was floating above it, with absolutely no connection to it whatsoever. I wasn't concerned. It didn't concern me at all in the slightest. It was this feeling of like, oh, that's odd. And I could see everybody running around, and I could see them doing the intubation, tilting the head back, and all this chaos. And suddenly it wasn't a tunnel for me, but what it felt as if I was floating above myself, watching myself from below, and seeing them trying to resuscitate me and intubate me. And the anesthesiologist trying to, just hold face and figure out what had happened. I really do not know how long I was out. The medical field does a great disservice because they did not communicate with me after my experience. So I cannot even say that this is on record. I can't say that, of course you can see it because they'll have the medical records of it, but, there was no discussion of it. There was no, that we had a complication. This is what happened. So I was left really wondering. And so in this experience, as I'm hovering above my body, everything begins to just go white. It wasn't a tunnel. It just seemed like to start in the center of it and just completely just overcome everything. And it felt as though my perception was a sensation of floating up and out. So it felt as when I was watching, it felt as if I had turned somehow and began to lift and go into this light that started to consume the entire room and space. So it wasn't a traveling per se for me. And what I found myself was, first and foremost, was the sensation of absolute freedom. I wasn't confused, but it felt very extraordinarily peaceful, like the most wonderful feeling. If you can ever imagine the most nurturing, loving feeling you've ever experienced in your life and amplify that infinitely. And it was as though this white, it was light, but it didn't hurt my eyes. It was as though I was, in the full face of a sun, but it did not bother my eyes. I could not see any other scenery at that moment other than just this extraordinary light. And the sound, the light had sound, and the sound had light, and it had movement and motion and color. It was alive. It is an indescribable feeling that is overwhelming. Pardon me, I didn't expect to get emotional with that. It was absolute respite. I was going through one of the most difficult times of my life. And to be quite honest, I wasn't sure if I was going to be brave enough, courageous enough to face what I was going to endure and face, what was happening in my life at that time. I had been denying a lot of experiences that I had earlier in childhood, and this was just fully amplified. So from that experience, I had freedom from that pain, if you will. There was no physical sensation. It was just awareness. And this light in front of me began to commune. It was, again, this living light. And the feeling of like I'm not supposed to be there, and this telepathic communication, because of course I don't have vocal cords, this being doesn't have vocal cords, but there's this instantaneous knowing and communion that is happening. But it was more of a receiving and a respite and a welcome, and more of like, okay, you can have a rest. Part of the thing that some NDers don't talk about is that there is no concept of time. Time is a construct of our existence in this three-dimensional existence on Earth. Time and space does not exist in that, whether I want to call it a dimension or that, but it is right here within us. So we think we're three-dimensional beings thinking two-dimensionally, thinking it's linear from beginning to end, but it doesn't. We are all contained within. And if you study sacred geometry, you know, the flower, the sacred flower of life, and how everything is truly contained within, and we are just part of it. And that was the feeling that I received, you know, in that light. So with this being communicating with me was more welcoming me in the moment. And then everything completely changed from there. Then I began to feel not a sense of confusion, but a full awareness of, oh, wow. Okay, now I understand what's happening. Now I understand where I am. You know, I'm not in my body, but I don't care. I just had a child, but I don't care. It is, I am home. I have always and forever, for the longest memory that I could have as a child, of always wanting to go home. I was home. And that was overwhelming for me. Now, my full name is Maria Guadalupe. I am named after Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is the Blessed Virgin, Our Lady of Guadalupe, who appeared to Juan Diego in Mexico. I have experiences with my family actually going to the Basilica, and the reason that I am named after her, which is another experience that I'll explain later, but that is my birth name. And this light transformed into a full appearance of her. So most people would see Jesus, most people, you know, the Christ consciousness, which of course that is absolute and was present. But for me, it was the Divine Mother, and her, through this light, I could see just a very faint image of her. Not as you would see a full person. It was like she was expanded and light would flow right through her, but I can see the silhouette in the eyes of her and how she has always appeared to me. And I was overwhelmed and just so thankful that the light that was white began to turn into like this golden, this gold essence is the best way that I can describe it, extraordinarily healing. The thing that we don't talk about is that time does not exist there. And so all of that I'm about to explain is that it felt like I was an entire lifetime there during my NDE, just to prepare me for the return. And so after her apparition to me, her showing herself to me, you know, I had a multitude of questions. And so from there, that's when we began, you know, I was taken to another location. I can't really fully describe it because it's not a facility like you would call a building. It's not hard structures with corners. Everything is lucent and transparent. I could choose to focus at a distance and see groups of lights, which I knew to be souls, to be consciousness of beings. That is what we are. And that's what I was being told at the time, that this is where we go, this is what we do, this is where we're from. This and taken to a room, again, I say that very loosely because it's indescribable. And being taken to what I would call not my soul group, because my soul group felt like they were at a distance, you know, that I would be able to see and focus. But this was more complex in the sense of being taken to my council. Every single soul has this. We have a divine wise counsel on the other side, and that number of counsel varies. I know that I have 12, and one was just recently added, so now I have 13. And at this time, there was specifically 4 that I was working with. And I love our new modern movies because they're really close depictions, that there's a lot of truth in what's conveyed in there. So I was able to see in a book, if you will, that moved like in a Harry Potter movie, like a still image that would move. And I was reviewing parts of my life that was happening at that moment and why I did not want to live. I will be very honest that I took the opportunity and I was glad. So I was being shown my life, shown things that had happened, and I was told that, wow, I chose it. That was, I think, the hardest part for me, is to think that there were victims, like we're victims of life, that all these horrible things happen to us. And it was explained to me that we make soul agreements, that this is just an illusion, that what we learn there as a soul is so grand and complex. We know tolerance, we know compassion, we know love, we know forgiveness. So as souls, we come into this 3-dimensional realm of illusion, which is very material and real. It is very much real. But the reason why we call it an illusion is because there is a continuation after that existence. We choose to come in and incarnate as a soul, have a life experience with a multitude of things that we ourselves chose to experience, nobody else. Life didn't do it to us. God didn't do it to us. Nobody's done it to us. We're not being punished for anything. We ourselves chose everything. And that was hard for me because I had experienced a lot of traumatic things. And I couldn't understand, why would I choose that? Why would children choose pain? Why would they choose these things? But as a soul, we are grand, all-knowing, wise. And as a child, that wise, grand soul still exists within that child. And in fact, they are closest to it. So that was being explained to me. So I was being shown these different parts and aspects of my life and the things that I was going through at the moment that my daughter was born. I did not want to face what I was going to be facing. I didn't think that I would have the courage or the strength to be able to endure it. And I was shown outcomes, potentialities, possibilities based on my free will and choice. So the other greatest thing that was explained is that the greatest gift, if you will, I don't even want to call it a concept, but there are other realms, other dimensions, other places where free will is not something that is given. It is not an automatic right of existence. It is very unique to our realm and the earth plane and in that area. So free will and choice has everything to do with it. So I was shown potentialities of, if I make this choice, what would happen? If I make this other choice, what would happen? What are the effects of it? How does that impact my soul agreements with the family the soul family I've incarnated with? How would those outcomes be? And I was basically told that there would be a period in my life where it would feel like absolute utter abandonment, but to try to remember. Now, that was the hardest part because I could remember, but I couldn't feel the support. I couldn't feel the connection when I came back. So everything that they were showing me was like, it's going to be okay. With the wise counsel, this is how you can address it, and this is how you can handle your life. And then hopefully we remember, because, as you know, and as other professionals and people have explained, is that not everybody remembers their full experiences of their NDE. So I was really practicing retaining the information, if you will. And my experience has not deteriorated. It is only amplified and become even more, I don't even have a word for it. And I could be skipping ahead, but it's pertinent in the moment to say that when I did come back, I've been able to remember these in layers. So while I was working with that Divine Wise Council, they were helping me to instill methods of remembrance, of practices that I could do to understand and work with it. Because what I was shown is that I had a soul agreement to work with souls to help them transition on this earth plane in this lifetime. This is something that is of my soul's purpose. I've done this multiple times, and this is something that I have never stated out loud, but being shown that I am an interdimensional star being chosen to be incarnate in this body, second generation. My mother being one, she was very aware and cognizant of her connection and her incarnation as a star being. And only after my near-death experience were she and I able to discuss it. And I'm very thankful that she and I had that experience. And so I was being shown that as well. Now, that is a lot to take in. So we worked it with my counsel, if you will, to where I would receive this information in layers. That as I acclimated and transformed and transitioned my life to infuse and incorporate all of this, that it would be given to me in layers of my understanding. Now, one thing is that I'm very skeptical. I'm do this work and I'm so skeptical, but I think it's important for me because I need to have, it's important for all of us to have a discerning ear. We need to be extraordinarily discerning of the information and ascertain how it fits with us. Is it information that we are ready to receive at the time? You know, information that I heard back then, I was not ready for. So it had to be given in layers so that I could have the incorporation. As new information was given, I'd incorporate it, make the transition. Another layer was given. And that took, now it's been 21 years, almost 21 years, 20 and a half to be exact. So that was probably one of the most important things with the council, was showing me this. Now, after that, and again, time does not exist, that I was taken from there and I was able to see the Divine Mother once more. I had an incredible communion with her, with, gosh, it's really difficult to explain, but with understanding of the interworkings of the universe. We tend to humanize God, because we don't have any other concept, but God and what I know is the I am, the great unity, that there's only oneness. And what I was shown was, if you would call it like the Big Bang, but not necessarily like that. Again, we think in two-dimensional, linear ways. When we think of an explosion, we think of it going just outward in one direction. But what I was shown is that every single one of us, every soul that is incarnate, every soul on the other side, everything that is in existence, all emanated from this original source. And it was like a microscopic pinpoint. So I was taken, if you will, and it wasn't a room. It was as if I was taken and being shown the history of the omniverse up until that point. And I was able to experience it as if I was watching it, a sacred observer watching all of this history of how we all exploded from one central point, how each one of us originate from that, how we are actually one, how we are not separate, how everything is in unity, and how this energy that exists throughout the universe holds and contains it. I love to study quantum physics and quantum mechanics and what they would call dark energy, not dark as in evil, negative, but very it's unseen. It's the unseen, and it takes up 97% of our existence. So I'm being shown all of these very, very in-depth, intricate secrets of the universe, how we existed, how we are all one, how we all emanate from the original source. Well, how do I apply any of that? So from there, being able to see, like, from the cosmos, it felt as if being a star, just floating out in space and being able to see all of the history of it occurring right before my eyes in real time. And it was, to say it was extraordinary or overwhelming is, there's no word for it. And to understand that every single one of us is so important, that the very absence of us would send ripples through time and space. There could not be an absence of us, even if we tried. And some of us try, but that's not possible. So those are the things that was explained to me. Now, from this grand vision of the universe, it then transitioned into something of, was this beautiful, serene scape. It was these hilltops flowing, everything had light and sound, translucent, transparent. And it was symbolic to me because it was shown, it was like a field of souls, if you will. And shown that if you can imagine, we can't even wrap our mind around it. If you can imagine a unique color for every individual soul, so if you can imagine an infinite sea of reds, an infinite sea of blues, so all intermixed and intermingled, but every single one with its own unique color, and was told that every single one of them represented a soul, and that I was to impact them somehow. And how the impact that we have sends these ripples. And then suddenly there was like this breeze that carried through this grassy field of all these flowers, and how all of them just gently swayed. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And it felt as though it wasn't like the scape was, again, not a planet, but this field. But then the universe was so close. So I could see galaxies that were, as even larger than the moon, and all of these different things. It's extraordinary. I was actually blown away recently with Disney's new movie Soul, because that field, they must have had a lot of insight and input, because I saw it and was really taken aback by it, because there's a lot of truth to that in the things that they depict in that. So it's time. I really resisted explaining a lot of these things before because, I didn't want to be made to be insane. There were other pieces of that near-death experience and other things, but oh my gosh, like hearing myself right now talking about these things is that, again, that I'm sharing a lot more than I ever have. And very, very few people that are closest to me have heard me say some of these things. So, Jeff, I want to thank you, because you're doing your purpose. You're allowing people such as myself this opportunity, because it really is time. The planet is needing it at this time. There's a huge thing that's occurring across the planet. And that's what I was told, is that I chose to incarnate in this time and place to make the difference. So after that field of flowers and, being told not to forget that I would have help and guidance and assistance, I was given, taken back to the room, if you will. It felt more circular, not even circular. It's hard to explain. Everything interfits like bubbles, but they're like hexagonal because everything fits interdimensionally. But it's like no walls, really complex. So taken back to that place with now a different group of counsel, of guides of mine, and being given the choice is that, I could stay there with them. But it was an agreement that I made that I could have the respite. I could have a reset button. We all want the reset button, and oftentimes that does happen, but the lessons do not disappear. They still continue. So in other words, I would have had to have come back, incarnate into another human experience, undergo and re-experience pretty much everything that I had already experienced, add another layer of complexity of the things that I was intended to experience in this lifetime and chose to walk away from. So we up the ante. It's in a sense of like, you can go back and complete what you've already started because you've got a good start, or you can let all of that go and try it again, but go through it all over again. And I could not even contemplate or fathom the idea of undergoing some of those extraordinary traumatic experiences that I underwent. So I made a choice to come back. And there was other guidance that was given, and being told that I would, if chosen, because everything is free will and choice, that I would have the help. And it's just for me not to forget that I was alone, because that's the number one thing when we're here, is that we just feel so alone and separate. So there, everything is connected. Everything is interconnected, intra-connected. We are all one, divine. So that was, really hard to come back into in a physical body without feeling that connection. So from that place, the next thing that I saw, if you will, is that that's tended to fade. It's not like we walked any place, because of course we don't have legs. So it was almost instantaneously where we would, the surroundings would transform around me, is more what it felt like. Although I felt I was in motion, it felt like my surroundings were also in motion. So intention and thought would meet with intention and thought and join. So you like to locate, I guess. And so from that final place was my final seeing of the Blessed Mother, Our Lady of Guadalupe, La Virgen. And she looks to me like La Virgen, just the way I would see her. I originally saw her in Mexico at the Basilica, in La Tilma. And that was really important to me. And what I saw was my mom's energy with her, which was really interesting, because my mom was alive at the time. My mom was holding my daughter. And I saw the Blessed Mother, and she was holding my daughter, Bianca. Bianca was just born. She was, by this time, maybe even 5 hours old. And I saw her holding her. And with that awareness, it was from the Divine Mother to my mother, to me, to my daughter, this divine feminine energy that we're bringing into this experience and into this earth plane at this time. And so with that awareness of my daughter and thinking, oh my God, not on the day my daughter's born. It was just that thought alone. It didn't even fade. It didn't even feel like it had the gentleness of fading. It just had this moment and this kind of panic sensation of, oh my God, my daughter. And it was just like, I think I jumped before I was actually ready, because it felt like I jumped 10 stories and that I had crash landed onto the cement, but into my physical body. And I was back and I felt everything. So by that time they had stabilized me. I was intubated. I could not move a muscle in my entire being. I was very aware of the room. I could hear. And the last thing I remember is this cradling, loving, nurturing energy at the head of I want to call it the bed, but it's the surgical bed. And just holding and whispering into my ear that, I was going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And with that, I just remember just one single tear just being able to come and stream down my eye. And I felt like I was choking. So if you're intubated and become aware and alert and conscious during an intubation, you literally have an entire apparatus into your throat. So they were breathing for me. So at this point, I think that I was midway in the, actually not even midway. I feel like they were just stabilizing me prior to the completion of the surgery, the tubal ligation, and it was done laparoscopically. And so as soon as I heard like, okay, we've got her, and somebody whispering to me that I was going to be okay, and to wait, it felt like an eternity. So it felt like I was being buried alive. I couldn't move. All I could do was stream one little tear, and I was back. And my body was convulsing. I believe at that point that they may have given me, something to just stabilize, and then they proceeded with the surgery. So I did have the tubal ligation, and I had a very a horrible time trying to come out of the anesthesia. Procedure that should have only lasted, and I can't even say the amount of time. I won't even, begin to, specify or anticipate what that would have been. But I know that it was about an hour longer than my mom expected. And when my mom was brought into the recovery room, I think that they brought her in to help me because I was having a very hard time acclimating and becoming fully conscious. By that time, my body was fully convulsing, and it felt like a short circuit of my energy system, my electrical system. And my mom took one look at me and just said, "Mija, what happened?" And I just busted out crying. I couldn't even explain it to her, and she just knew. So the recovery was really difficult. I stayed in the recovery for some time, and then I was finally taken back to the birthing room. I was lucky where the birthing room and the room that we stayed in was one and the same. We weren't transferred. And then I know that my daughter felt it. So she was crying and screaming when I came into the room, and when I finally held her, she was finally at peace. And there she and I camped for 3 days. So every single time I would try to just, put her down into a little clear plastic bassinet next to me, she would scream and wail. And so I would pick her right back up. And I had a pillow, just an encasing of pillows all around me, just so that she and I could, have that connection. So, yeah, I could not talk about this experience for a very long time after that. I think the first person was my mom, also my ex-husband, Anthony, and just really trying to understand what had even happened. Up until that point, I wasn't really familiar with near-death experiences or past lives or anything such as that, fascinated by it. I have a very open mind, but had absolutely no ground or basis for this experience. And so the next, years was really about me trying to figure that out. And so as I mentioned before, that I'm a skeptic and I do this and I work in this field. And for me, the way that this has always, I set this up for myself. I know this as a feature of my soul, if you will, that I'll have the experience first and then the validation will come after. And what that means to me is that I'll have this, extraordinary experience that is totally unbeknownst to me up until that moment. And then after having it, then will I go and begin to read or research or, find other individuals who may have had similar experiences to just learn about it. So for me, it's always the experience first, and then the seeking for the understanding, and then the validation after. And so that was my first the prominent near-death experience that happened in June 5th. So almost 20 years ago, 21 years ago almost.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that with me. I really appreciate it. And I'm just going to go back and ask you some questions of things I was curious along the way.
Okay.
Hopefully I can remember them all. First thing was, what I'm curious of is right in the beginning when you went black and then you were out of your body. So can you it's just you went black and then was it black for a while and then all of a sudden you were out? Or can you go into more depth of that initial experience there?
What I feel that was the loss of consciousness. So because of the bypassing of the spinal fluid in the spinal block, and it was either given too fast or just the dosage was too high, I stopped breathing and my heart stopped. So during that time, the blood flow is shunted from the brain. And so I'm assuming that is the physical reaction of the losing of consciousness, almost as if somebody faints. Mm-hmm. That's what it felt like to me, is just losing consciousness, where I'm just as if I fainted. Everything goes black and I'm out. So it wasn't a location per se at that moment. It was just the loss of consciousness, where there was no more vision and just everything dark.
Do you have any idea of how much time passed from losing consciousness to being out of your body? Or do you think it just went black and then immediately you were out?
it went black, and then my next awareness was being in the operating room, not the delivery room, operating room, because I was just wheeled from my delivery room. So then that was my next awareness, was actually, so there was a gap. So I'm assuming that would be maybe 5 minutes, if not more, if they're wheeling me down the hall to the operating room, and then there's chaos with them trying to find the crash cart, for the intubation and for also the resuscitation. So the time that it would take to wheel me just out of the room, because I lost that blackness, went just as they were wheeling me out of the room. I had just barely made it out of the delivery room, just as they were wheeling me down the hall. Then everything, don't remember. Then my next awareness was in that operating room with chaos. So however long it took them to get there and to, get everybody in place. So I would imagine anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes or so.
Okay, interesting. So you have a Catholic background. Do you feel that this was a Catholic and religious experience, or really more of a spiritual?
More of a spiritual. So I was born and raised Catholic. I have a very rich history in Santa Fe, where we have the largest adobe structure in the United States, which is a church there. My great-grandfather donated that property, but my family was very spiritual. So although we were born and raised Catholic, I was always questioning. My grandmother on my father's side, who baptized me, she was also very open-minded. So I had experiences with both of them, were in my grandma Hinoveva on my mother's side. So we had in our family, if you can imagine, being in a traditional culture with natural healing that we've done for generations. In my culture, the Hispanic culture would be the curanderismo. So curandera, or a healer, shaman, in other words. And so I had that within both of my lineages. And so I remember my grandmother making, what's called trementina, ointments, and doing what's called limpias, which are energy clearings and different things like that. And then my grandmother on my father's side was very, she loved to read, very cerebral, very intelligent, and very spiritual. Now, I was born in the 70s, fresh out of the 60s, and my father was really seeking. We have a Sikh community in New Mexico. This image that's behind me actually is a mural that's painted at what's called the Hacienda Guru Ramdas in Sombrillo, New Mexico, which is just around Tesuque. People might have heard of Chimayo, which has the Santuario de Chimayo healing area. So I have this all within my family, but yet my father and my mother were both very open. My father was introduced to this muralist. His name is Ed O'Brien, was originally from Chicago, introduced him to, it's called the I Am. It's actually from Joel Goldsmith. So it's a huge background and a huge following, if you will, of consciousness, of understanding unity and oneness. So my grandmother, Mary, my father, my mother went to Chicago, was able to see, have these lectures. I was introduced to Sikh communities. My mother was born and raised in Santa Fe, but also has connections to San Francisco. So is also cultured and very open to other cultures. So I was brought up, Catholic with this background, but also very, very spiritual and very, very open-minded. So we do have this connection, I guess, does influence my experience because of, the background that I have. And that's one thing that I've been told, and what's been explained is that, each of us NDEers, we do have an influence on our experience based on our soul's experience, but also because we choose it in this lifetime. So for even people who are atheists who have this experience, well, they chose it prior to their existence, prior to their incarnation, still chosen. So we all choose how we perceive that information in the best way that our mind can digest and hold that information. So I know that that's a very complex way to answer your question. I hope that I did, and probably opened up a lot more.
Oh, it's okay. It's fine. Can you give me an abbreviated answer of who the Blessed Mother is and her story?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So she's the Blessed Mother. She's the Divine Mother, the Adi Shakti, also in other languages and other cultures, if you will. It's the Divine Mother, the Mother, the Supreme. So in that place of my near-death experience, being shown the interworkings of the universe, where we have God, the I Am, and the Goddess Supreme, that because we have duality, both of those have to exist. One holds the plane of reality, where the other brings everything into creation, into being. And that is the Mother Supreme. She comes into form and energy as the divine feminine. It's just energy. It's a different quality. It has nothing to do with gender. So that's divine creation. And that is the embodiment of what she is. And so she has had multiple apparitions around the world in multiple cultures. And it is not limited to just the Hispanic. Now, La Virgen here in this particular poster of this mural, she appeared to Juan Diego in Mexico in 1512. And it was on the day of, there was a huge turmoil that was happening with the people there in the conversion. The people that Amerindians were taken over through Spaniards. And so they were desperate and just really diminished peoples. And she appeared to bring the message of hope and unity and oneness and the Divine Mother. And so, yes, I don't know how abbreviated that was, but.
Oh, no, I think it's good. And I think where I got confused is, and maybe other people may be the same way listening, is when you hear the Divine Mother and then you hear the Virgin, my mind immediately goes to this is the Virgin Mary.
Correct.
But this is not the Virgin Mary. This is kind of like the Mother of creation.
It is
different
actually
from the Virgin Mary, correct?
One and the same. So
it's the same. One and the same. Okay.
So she, and this is the most amazing thing, is that she is that embodiment. So just like Jesus would be the embodiment of the Christ consciousness, Mother Mary, La Virgen, those are all variations of her one existence. I don't know how to explain that, but she appears in a multitude of ways, but is all one. So it is the Divine Mother. She is the one. She's yes, it is the same. But people would not know her at that level, if you will. And I don't even know if I want to call it a level, but to know that grand unity and the divinity and all that she embodies is far more in depth and extraordinary of how she just appears in the simplest of terms. Just again, Buddha, Jesus. Yeah. Right. They are part of in a grand consciousness.
So her name was Guadalupe, though, right?
Correct.
Okay, and I could see other religions around the planet having a kind of a same story for a divine female energy of creation and having another name for her.
Well, Guadalupe is actually, I believe, and I could have this mistaken, but I believe it's an Arabic word, where she was actually appeared. This is the interesting thing. She appeared because it was a message to the priest at the Basilica in Mexico to overturn, because these peoples were being suppressed. So there were, if you can imagine, all these Amerindians, there were millions of them at that time that were being overtaken by another culture, and they were absolutely desperate without hope. And so she appeared to give a message to the priest to say, basically let the people be without the oppression. And there was this big, massive attempt for conversion of their Amerindian ways into Catholicism. So there was a lot of battling and all of this horrific, horrendous history that is history that occurred. And so the Amerindians, they needed hope. The Mayans, the Mexicans, all of these people needed that. And so she appeared to bring that hope and that message. And so there was a lot of complexity in the image that she imprinted, so that they would know that she is the Divine Mother, that that she was there for them, because she's also known as La Morenita, and in Spanish that means like darker complected. And so there's a history of how she came to be in Mexico, just so that we could bring peace to the people. The tilma, which is a robe that he's now canonized, Saint Juan Diego wore. The story is that she appeared in the field, told him to go pick flowers that did not grow from the area, Castilian flowers. He went and picked them, put them in his tilma, and she brought them. She, touched them and held them in this field where she appeared to them and said, okay, now take them to the priest. And when he let the tilma go, instantaneously imprinted on the tilma was her. And there have been so many studies done of that one piece of material that they cannot identify how it is even in existence. It is a very, very rough, coarse material made of very poor culture. It was made of agave leaves where they were ground, and so that's coarse and rough. And they used it to lay down on, to carry things, and so it was a simple cloth. The studies have shown that they cannot ascertain the origination of the pigments that were used in the cloth. It shows no plant life or no animal life. There's nothing that and even the structure of the cloth itself, where the fibers are thicker, actually portray very specific parts of her image. The lips is actually made by the texture of the cloth itself. They've tried to burn it. They've even tried to bomb it. They threw acid at it, and it has not destructed. It is incredible. So I got to see that when I was 3 years old, and my first my second near-death experience was when I was there. It wasn't a full-on near-death experience. I was 3 years old, and at the place that we were staying had my father was he was studying at university. We were there because bilingual education, and he was doing an internship. And so we were at a swimming pool. I remember going under. I remember just probably sucking in the water, probably was there under. There was a lot of people, a lot of kids. And then I just remember that same golden light and then coming back. But there was no experience, no exchange of information. It was not supposed to be here, and then right back at 3. And then we went on to the Basilica and got to see this, and I was named after her. So it has a deep, deep rooted history in that, and she still continues to be for me today.
Would you say today that you're more spiritual, or are you still practicing Catholicism?
Well, that's so interesting, is that I started off, deep into Catholicism, but it didn't, because of that, my upbringing and after this experience, it did not offer me the answers that I needed. So I had a lot of difficulty with it. There was a lot of things that are taught that are not what I fully believe in. And I actually taught second grade catechism for 4 years, up until my son was like, Mom, do you really believe in that? And I'm like, I don't. So in all honesty, because, I love teaching young children. I was teaching second graders for 4 years. And I can say, where's God? And they can say everywhere, in the trees and there. And, by the time you get to sixth grade, the dogma is becoming more solidified. So when my son hit that age and he said, do you really believe in this? That's another story, because my son was born needing to be resuscitated, had a near-death. So he was born through a near-death experience, one of which I also had on the table with him. That was another one where it was, nope, the flash out there, okay, come back, because he needed my attention. And so that was not a full-on near-death experience. But yeah, it's extraordinary. There's so much to say, Jeff.
Yeah, I know. And I have so many questions. I found it amazing the way you explained in your story, and maybe you can kind of expand on this or if this is true for you, but I found it amazing how you come to the realization that you chose all this stuff in your life. And I guess you were like, my gosh, I chose this. Mm-hmm. And then was your second question, why did I choose this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what I've now come to understand is that, again, I've already stated, being a second generation star being, I'm not, there's a realm of souls that are human, and a realm, if you will, if you can imagine a cataclysm that happened on the earth, a calling out to the multiverse, the omniverse, and all of these souls from all of these different interdimensions saying, I'll go. Again, with free will, we can't impose change on the outside. It has to come from the inside. So free will and choice. In order, now look at society, look at the state that we're in, look at these near cataclysms that we've had, look at the pollution, look at all of these things that have happened, right? So if that's not changing, because those are the choices that we're making, we're choosing to pollute. There are souls that have hailed in to make this change from within by small incremental things. Most people aren't even aware how many I couldn't even tell you. But I am not, another species. I am fully human, but my soul, my consciousness, it hails from another realm, another dimension, another existence. I have had, experiences of living on another planet. I've had a memory of that. I've had a memory of also, being here in a different alien body way back in the day. So all of these complexities and understanding that we choose it all, that my one little tiny existence as just Maria, is far grander and greater that we can possibly even begin to imagine or fathom. And so that was not revealed to me. I did not have full retention of that information because that would have just flipped my lid too much. That actually, even though I knew it and I felt it and was able to experience it, the depth of it was revealed in layers over the years as my understanding grew and as my courage of talking, first to my mom and to others and really understanding what it was. So yeah, it was, and so understanding that we do choose it all. That's a really, really hard thing to understand as a human. And it's a really difficult thing to say. That's another reason why, I wouldn't have said that before, because an NDEer can understand that this is temporary. It's temporal. I'm ready to go. If this happens tomorrow, I'm ready. I'm excited. I hope it doesn't, because I'm glad that I'm here finally. I have a lot to do, a lot to accomplish, people to reach. But, if it happens, I'm ready to go. For others who haven't had the benefit of the near-death experience, understanding, oh my gosh, what is awaiting us after we pass, there would be no doubt. So for somebody who's never had that experience to hear, well, you've chosen it all. That hard thing you're going through right now, just get over it, because guess what? You're going to be gone in a moment. They're going to say, well, pardon me, but beep, beep, you, who are you to tell me? So that's a really, really difficult thing to have awareness of now when majority of people don't. And part of my purpose is to help them understand that. So after this experience, things that I had been suppressing, growing up, completely were flipped on. Every single psychic, extra sensory thing that you could think of, happened, and me trying to cope with it and how to deal with it. Mine has not dissipated. I am a medium. I can sense and feel people who have passed. I can sense and feel beings. I introduce guides to other clients. I do energy work. I do healing work. I'm a hypnotherapist. I do past life regressions. I've done and seen extraordinary things, all to help people. But it didn't start that way. I started, if somebody told me that this is what I would become, 20 years ago, I would have said, you're crazy. I just wanted to be sane myself. all of this was just for me to help myself understand me, understand what I went through. How do I cope with life, knowing what I know, what I felt, this level of what I'm remembering at this level? How do I deal with it? And so it has, revealed itself in layers. And yeah, so again, those are things that I would not necessarily talk about. And this is the first time publicly.
How would you advise someone who has recently had an NDE that has not shared it with very many people and is having difficulty coping with their experience and their life? What advice would you give to them?
I love that you asked this question, because somebody very near and dear to me has had one, but is having difficulty. So the best thing is take the time that you need to really reflect. There's so much that is depending on the person. Not everybody's is different. Every soul is unique. Everybody's existence is unique. So everybody's experience is going to be unique. And so mine is going to look very different to others. And that's intentional, because again, we're a unique existence. So for those that are new to this, really struggling, is, give yourself the time. You're not alone and you're not crazy. The other reason I didn't talk about this is because on my mother's side, we do have diagnoses and history of mental illness in the family. I have an uncle, her brother, my dear uncle, is diagnosed schizophrenic. If I was to talk about these things after my near-death experience, 20 years ago, I very well could have been diagnosed very much the same. And my experience would have been entirely different. So I would say also be careful who you choose to talk to. There are those who have who've earned the right to hear our stories. I've heard that originally from Dr. Brene Brown. Have they earned the right to hear your story? Are they going to diminish it? And the interesting thing for me is that I was really struggling. Especially 3 years after this. I went to see 4 doctors. They wanted to prescribe me antidepressants. I thought, okay, well, maybe they're right. So I went to somebody very close to me that I confided in, that was not prepared to hear what I had to say and really rejected, and it really created a huge rift, for about a good solid 8 years. And that was probably the most difficult thing. Now, in my near-death experience, I was told that there would be a period of my time where I would feel absolutely alone and rejected, but to remember. And so through that was probably the hardest thing to hold on to, is that I wasn't alone, that it's going to be okay. That, because I grew up in a religious family, there are, certain people that feel that this is, certain things you shouldn't mess with. That you're dabbling or something, that this is an evil thing or a dark thing or a scary thing. And to somebody who does not know, I can completely understand how it can be perceived that way until there's understanding. So, coming new to this, be careful who you tell. If you do, and you can get a sense of it, because as you've probably heard, that most of us that come back, I feel like I straddle 2 realms. Honestly, Jeff, I really don't feel like I fully acclimated 100%. I feel like I'm still straddling. Again, because I'm an intuitive, a medium, a psychic, and I do all of these different things. I have, it's more like a soul reading. It's wide open for me still, but yet I'm able to tune into it almost as if it's like a radio station in the background, but I'm still fully here. Most people who have near-death experiences fully acclimate back and have, some intuition heightened and things, but mine was completely flipped on, turned on, and never shut off. And that was so hard to deal with. And I had to really learn how to deal with it myself. Never did I think I would be helping others through it. It was too private, too scary, too personal, too crazy to even think that I would share it at this level, and much less help others through it.
Maria-Lupita, unfortunately, I only have so much time due to my editing, so that's why I always cut these at about an hour. And for everybody who listens, that's also why I stop at an hour, because the editing gets hard on the computer. And when they go too long, it takes forever to edit. So one thing is, will you come back and join me again? Because I still have more questions about this near-death experience, and we can still hear about your other ones as well.
Okay, I would love to. Like I said, this is a really great opportunity, and I just thank you for this. And I know that the time is right, and I am so thankful that you reached out. You really are making a difference, and you need to know that. So for all of us out there that want to share this, and all of us out there that are wanting to hear it, thank you.
Well, thank you, and I hope more people who want to share will contact me. And as I try to usually say, without you and the guests, there is no podcast. Before I go, though, real quick, some people after hearing this may want to reach out to you. So are you a public person on social media or your website or something? And if so, can you tell people how to contact you?
Absolutely. I definitely am. I'm really stepping into this within this last year because my father passed away last year, exactly to be a year. So I'm all in it, and I am brand new, opening up and really building it. So my website is my name. So just as you put it in the title, it's Maria-Lupita Gurule.com. I know that's hard to pronounce and much less spell, but if it's there, it's my name. And I do have social media. I actually have so much to share that I'm interested in putting a podcast together for myself. And I do have a YouTube channel where I do some videos and actually interview people that I've had sessions with and things like that. So really excited because I'm building fresh, and I really hope people join.
Well, that's great. And I wish you massive success with all of that.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate you.
All right. And thank you so much, Maria-Lupita. I really appreciate you coming on my show. And hopefully I'll see you back soon.
All righty. Thank you so much, Jeff.
All right. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.